Good afternoon and welcome to Unfiltered Finance. I'm your host, Ron Geffner. By way of background, I started my career at the SEC where I used to prosecute money managers. I've been in the financial services industry now for over 30 years. I think I have a good sense of how the finance industry and business works. It's about time you learn more about it as well. I'd like to welcome to the show today our guest, Joe Greco, who I've had the pleasure of working with and I really think very strongly of. So welcome, Joe.
Thanks so much for having me, Ron.
Always a pleasure. And I really enjoy the fact they're trying to mimic my voice. So I really appreciate your shouting and screaming the weekend prior to this.
That's right. I figured if I got just the appropriate amount of authoritative raspiness in my voice, we might actually be like, we could go on the road, just the two of us.
We'll take the show on the road. That's a great idea.
Won't sell too many tickets, but at least we'll be on the road together.
You say that, you know what? Think positively, manifest, Joe. Don't be a pessimist. There's enough of them out there. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what it is you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so broad scope, as you know, having left Wall Street about a dozen years ago, I launched a coaching and professional development business. And so for the last decade plus, I've been very excited about helping executives, leaders, entrepreneurs take their skill set, most of the soft stuff, their leadership, their creative problem solving, their team dynamics, their presentation up to the next level. And it's a great opportunity for me to share some things that I've learned along the way. It's a great opportunity for me to continue to be a knowledge broker, just like I was when I was on Wall Street. Different types of knowledge, quarterly earnings and, why is the stock going up and down? And now we're talking about best ways to get your message across, how to lead with confidence and influence others, and then also how to make sure that you're aware of your blind spots or you enlist others to help you identify what those blind spots are so you can be the most effective, top of the company as you can.
And that's actually a really helpful overview of your business. So in selecting clients, I assume it's not every client fits your mold. So how do you go about picking prospective clients, and how do you promote yourself to those people to make sure it's a really good match?
Insightfully, thank you. So I have the benefit of running a referral-only business. And I say that it's a benefit, it's a blessing, because obviously you have to, one, earn the right to be referred in and have people refer you. But even more than that, it becomes like self-prophesizing, where you start to dig deeper and deeper and you learn from each iteration. So I don't necessarily screen out as much as I probably should. But what I do know is discovery, just like in a legal practice, right? Discovery is critical to understanding what you're looking to achieve, what the individual or organization is trying to have as an outcome or outcomes plural, which ways I might lead the coaching regime or the facilitation or the keynote, whatever it might be, to take them on a journey and give them an experience that's meaningful and achieves the things that they set out to achieve. So in the end, it starts off with really good discovery. I come to the understanding of what it is that the individual or the group or the entire firm wants to achieve. I present back to them my findings, and here's the path that, as the expert, I would take if I were you. Do you want to make the investment in it? And then at that point in time, the client can say, all right, we've got it. We're going to go for this. We're going to make the investment of time way more important than the money. The money is usually the easy part, but really make the investment of time and humility to go through a process of transforming yourself, of growing, of having a little bit of introspection. All of that leads me to whether or not we're going to be a fit. Because if somebody doesn't make it through that process, they've kind of weeded themselves out, which is a very polite way for me to not have to say, maybe you should work with someone else.
Now, I want to make sure I leave the audience and myself with a clear image of what it is you just shared. Does it mean that as long as they show interest and they're willing to roll up their sleeves, and you use the word humility, I presume that means being less guarded and open to feedback and vulnerable about sharing. But are there other reasons that might cause somebody not to be the right fit, even though they're willing to do all those things?
Great point of clarification. So there's 4 elements, and you have to have 3 of them for me to work with you. So the 4 elements are, you have to have something or some things, plural, that you want to work on, right? That could be your presentation skill, your leadership style, team dynamic, whatever. You just got promoted. You want to act the part at a higher level now. You have to be willing or coachable in the moment. You have to have resources, and you have to actually have urgency. And if you don't have urgency, but you're aware of it, you're coachable, and you're willing to commit some resources, I can fire up the urgency. But if you're not coachable, there's no reason for us to proceed. And I can find that out pretty quickly. If you don't have anything that you're working toward, then what's the point of us really get together? Or if it's not clear to both of us and we don't agree what it is that we're working toward, then that doesn't make sense either. So with those four, it's really important to identify those. And that's what usually that first or even a second discovery call are. And at that point in time, then I know the prospect or the client group or the team are very well aware. These are the things we want to work on. We're super urgent about them. We're going to be coachable, humble, exhibit humility in the moment or through the sessions. And then ultimately, of course, they want to invest the time and the resources to make the program work.
So today, I want to focus more on the organization and not the individual who might be trying just to improve on their own, independent of the organization. Because I feel like that's an easier conversation to have. So I'd rather focus on the more difficult piece. So what percentage of your engagements are looking at the organization and more than one person within the organization? And what's that experience like?
It's a bit of a complementary scenario because oftentimes you have a starting point for me might be with an individual. And then we migrate into, now that we've kind of sunk our teeth into the things that the individual's working on, you know what? I really need to bring in this junior partner or my protege or my colleague, the board, the people that I sit across the table from when we make decisions. And so it usually goes that way fairly quickly. And almost without fail, if we're starting, especially if it's a small team or a department, we'll want to bolt on some type of breakout for individuals or even smaller clusters, because it's very important to have that time where you could say, okay, we all agreed as a group, we all agreed as a firm, we all were cheering out there in the audience while Joe was on stage talking about something that resonated with our audience. But in the end, there's that extra, a final mile, they call it in shipping, to deliver it right to your doorstep where you connect with the coach. And whether it's me or someone on my team, that's the opportunity to make it real for that individual, just going that extra mile, that final mile to bring it home. So most often I will try to put those together, but the group sessions, the leadership teams, the board sessions are really geared toward making sure that there's smooth dynamics, low friction, the ability to address some of the elephants in the room. And sometimes there's a few elephants sitting in the room. As you know, you've been through life, you've seen scenarios. Oftentimes,
that's why my hair is white.
What's interesting, the more I go through these situations, it actually is less about like pride. It is less about ego. It's more about their ears don't work. For some reason or another, their ears only get like 3 out of every 5 words or 7 words that their partners, their colleagues, their subordinates are sharing with them. And so they start to fill in the gaps, just like the hallucinations you see in ChatGPT. That's what our brains do. Our brains kind of fill in sometimes the gaps, and then we take away, even in the moment, we kind of take away a perception or a translation of what the person's saying that's not accurate. And that could throw off an entire conversation. It could throw off an entire strategy session or even the whole dynamic of a team. So a lot of times it's simply bringing somebody in who can help retranslate and repackage what's being said, what's being heard, and what's not being heard, and making sure that everybody gets on the same page about the message, not because there's really like a turf war or an ego battle, but more because people in general are just like whirring around in their own heads and they're not listening in the moment.
And I was about to highlight that. So look, somebody once said to me, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in the ratio given to you.
It's a great one.
And my experience has been, like, even when you go to fast food or a restaurant or a store and you're ordering things, most people do not listen. And that's one of the bigger problems, I think, in the society that we live in. It's that with all the information, all the access that we have, I think we're becoming more tribal, and people are, despite all the input, we're actually having less contact, less intimate communications because of all the information out there. But going back to the corporate side, I've been running the law firm with other partners for now going on 30 years. And what I knew when we first started to where I am today is night and day. So many lessons to be learned and so many lessons still to learn. But one of the hardest things is not coming up with the idea, not getting consensus with your colleagues. It's execution and sticking to the execution. So that's what I really want to focus on as we're digging deeper. So corporate consulting and execution. What's the process one might go through to assess what the organization is thinking and then implement it?
And you're talking about throw the periscope up and kind of like getting a sense of where the org is and how far from shore, how far from maybe safe harbor, or how far out to sea they might be.
Yeah, but it's more so that if you go in and coach an individual, you're operating in a vacuum. That individual, as you just clarified, has blind spots. I know from working with you and I know from having communicated, you ask what are the goals of the person that is sitting with you. It's some of the 4 items you look to in taking on an engagement. But speaking to the individual in isolation of the group may not really add value to the group as a whole. So to me, it's more about organizations, not the sole proprietorships. It's somebody that's in between. It's not multi-hundred person organization. What I'm trying to get to is what steps, really, what are the hardcore steps? We'll use me as an example. I have equity partners, I have non-equity partners. We have staff that we all work together with. It's getting on the same team, right? Same dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not going to be entirely the same dream, but you're going to have some of the same characters and elements, I think. And the beauty of having a very dynamic team, I happen to know Sadis quite well, quite a few of your partners, associates, Ashley up front, and everybody. It's the kind of situation in modern day. You have nimble, dynamic organizations, high performers, hard workers, people who are out doing outside sales, pounding the pavement, still running the circuit, but also folks who are at the desk, document work, phone work, email work, digital work product. What ends up happening is we kind of get like blind to what we're really going for because we get very focused. And you said tribalism. I would say almost like a tribe of one, where now all the things that I have on my list, my docket, right, starts to fill up with things that matter to me. They matter to my practice. They matter to my clients. They matter to my department. They matter to the partners and the associates that I'm working with on those matters. That's what they are. I kind of forget about Sadis, right? I'm not projecting, but I'm saying I probably would because I'd be so focused on all the things that are on my docket. And so just being diligent, it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing, just being diligent about saying, once a quarter, we're going to spend a couple hours. We're all going to turn everything off. We're all going to either tune in if you can't physically be in the office, or we're going to go off site for 2-3 hours. And we're just going to check in on goals that we've already set or goals that we want to have as a group. It doesn't have to be this big kumbaya. It doesn't have to be 3 days at like a retreat center. Those I think are very good to do at least once a year, but even like a half day, those few hours, it lets everybody push to the side what they are so focused on in their specific job function, their role, their functional group, and take a step back and say, like, what are we really doing this for? Are we marching toward those dreams or those aspects of the dream that the firm's looking for? It could be expanding by headcount. It could be expanding by practice area. It could be opening new office. It could be changing the complexion of the space, the environment itself, right, which is a big undertaking. And so just doing that on a very, very periodic basis, not monthly, definitely not weekly, way too intense. Taking the step back as a group.
How often recommend for clarity purposes?
I think quarterly. I do that with boards, I do that with executive teams, and I do that with firms. A half a day, 2-3 hours for the entire firm to log out for 2-3 hours. That's it. I think that is a huge, valuable investment. Now, the other side of it is whoever's responsible for the agenda, keep it to like 3 items. Because all of a sudden it's like, well, we're going to cram everything in. And then you get going. And at,
You only get in 1 inch deep, and
yeah,
that's not good enough.
2 hours and 58 minutes in, you're on item number 2 of 5. Not everybody's had a chance to even speak, so you have to be mindful of eat the elephant one bite at a time and just kind of work through it. Use it for what its purpose is. Now, that's where you really should have an annual offsite. Any firm that has under 100 people for sure should be able to make time for that. Firms that are bigger can do it, but then it becomes more of a conference scenario where you're having functional group meetings, then big get-togethers, and that's all good too. But you really want to make sure that you at least spend one full day, one night, 2 days offsite where you have a chance to have entertainment, you have a chance to develop culture, you have a chance to maybe bring in someone or do an event that's really unique, race car driving or some kind of art thing or a sporting event of some sort. And then you bring in someone who can do some developmental work. And it might be even people on the team who lead you through a facilitated 3-hour, 4-hour, 5-hour session. You don't want to overload it because everybody doesn't want to go out and then have to work somewhere else, right? Give them the chance to be offsite too, and the disconnection will help. But I would say annually, you do that, the 2 days, one night over somewhere, and it gives you a chance to really breathe as an organization. And then quarterly, you check in on those.
And then how do you increase the likelihood that when you're sitting with individuals, you're not guiding them in a way that clashes with the corporate culture of the rest of the organization?
Well, communication and clear communication, making sure that everybody says and hears what they intended. It doesn't mean they have to sing the exact same words, but they've got to at least be in harmony with each other. If they're singing different verses at the same time, that's okay. It's just got to sound good together. So that's important. From there, then you can go, you start to micro back down into functional group, into what's my docket as an individual contributor and what am I going to be focusing on? As long as I know every 90 days or so, I'm checking back in up the line. My brain, it's pretty powerful. It's going to make sure that I can stay on task and know that I'm very tactical and practical day in, day out. And then I start to zoom out a little with my group. Maybe once a week, I have alignment meetings with my group. And then once a quarter, we come together and we talk as a team and check in on everything that everybody's doing and making sure we're on the right course. And then we do big strategic once a year. So again, it's zooming out and zooming back in. The accordion method of what do we do day to day, very tight, and then expanding back out for the strategic, once a year or so.
Any tricks here's one of the things I'm realized. We as organizations, and I'm not specifically just discussing sadism. We represent over 1,000 funds, so I see a lot of
we can make this about you and Sadis. I won't send you a bill. It's okay.
Yeah, I have you on the podcast, so I don't get billed for this. The whole purpose. You know what? You got to hurry because my dermatologist is coming on, and I got to take my shirt off. And then after that, my therapist ones get the biggest hits. Okay, so focusing on the other thing, one of the many things I've noticed with a lot of organizations, they come up with a plan, and then to them the facts change, and so they abandon the plan.
Yeah.
The facts change, meaning the economy changes, their staffing situation changes, their cash flow changes. So what guidance can you give the audience and me on when that problem occurs? Right? We agree to open up an office in another city, or we agree to grow a practice, or the back office. And I get it happens, but I feel like with a lot of organizations, for every time they try and problem solve, there's an excuse as to why they abandoned it.
Yeah. I mean, what's the phrase about belly buttons and excuses or whatever? It's
I might charge you if I have to correct things. By the way, going back, how do you eat an elephant in small bites?
Yeah, so one bite at a time.
Next time you reference it, that's the easier way to say it. How do you eat an elephant in small bites?
I'm going to get you a mug that says, like a coffee mug that says, I'm silently judging your improper grammar.
So anyway, how do you keep people on task so they don't come up with a reason as to why they spend hours coming up with a plan and abandoning it? Conversely, where you're not so committed to the plan that the Titanic is going down.
And the problem is that usually 1 out of 4 which means 2 out of 8, which means 3 out of 10, probably partners, people in a group, right? Somebody's dramatic. Somebody's the one who is like just so exhausted by the idea of committing to something that might be a little bit of a different route to a goal. They're already entering into it with skepticism. They're already entering into it with like, I'm only going to give it like one little trip up and then that's it. I'm abandoning ship. And so that's a bad place to start. That's a bad place to be in a marriage. That's a bad place to be as teammates on a sporting team. That's a bad place to be with, executive committee members or, partners in a business. Even with a client, right? How many times you have a client, like, here's the strategy. And like 2 days later, you lay it all out. And 2 days later, they call you asking you the same questions they asked you 2 days prior, in a panic, wondering what the deal is. You have to just reiterate what the program is that you agreed to. So oftentimes it's really just like one or two out of a bunch who are like a little too dramatic to begin with. So what we have to do when we make the plan, when we talk about it, we get them to that point, figure out how dramatic are they. If they're really dramatic, have everybody sign a piece of paper that says, we are going to give this plan 90 days. We're not going to revisit it. We're not going to question it. We're not going to derail it. If we have to make little tweaks, then we can do it. But substantially, we are going to do these steps as we agreed for 90 days before we grade it, before we abandon it. And now everybody legitimately, I mean, it sounds like very academic or like almost elementary, but everybody signs their name on a little doc, and you kind of just like, push pin it in somewhere, maybe in the break room. And you say like, all right, now this is us committing that we're going to do it. And in that period of time, 90 days, you're going to have a holiday or two. You're going to have a couple of people out sick. You're going to have somebody get hired, somebody get fired, somebody have a problem, some up and down in the market. There's enough that'll happen in 90 days to stress test it. And if you make it 90, now you can say, okay, what do we learn? We need to, turn the volume up over here. We need to mute over here, and we need to add this to the equation. Great. Another 90 days, sign it up. But when you go and you say, all right, we're going to take a look, like office example, right? This happens all the time because it's legitimately going into a different geography. You're setting off into a new, uncharted waters. So you're going to go somewhere. You say, okay, we're going to check it out. We're going to have a couple of events. We're going to get a feel for the area. We're going to maybe look at a couple of different offices, and then we'll see what we can do. What happens? Well, one person has a great experience. They're probably the ones that already wanted to go to that market. They have contacts there. They have vacation home there, whatever it is. They already wanted to go anyway. Another partner might say, okay, well, I'm into it. And they start to go. They go to an event. They make some contacts. It's good, but they're kind of like the attaché to the original. The third one books a trip. They've got a family function. They're kind of running to the airport that morning. They got to leave early. And then there's a weather pattern that makes it unbearable, right? And then the fourth one shows up after 3 failed attempts. The fourth one shows up, and what happens? It's poor attendance. Why? Because nobody knew that they were coming. We didn't plan in advance. We're kind of getting weak with like the marketing of it, whatever it is. So did those 4 people, hypothetical, in that scenario, give it 90 days? No, they didn't. Did those 4 people commit to really go through?
Yeah, they didn't show. They really didn't show up with their heart, with their mind and body. They were physically present, nothing more.
But I bet it's because they didn't plan it. They didn't talk that out. Instead, they broke. And the first person who was already fully committed knew exactly what they were going to do. The last person was sitting there going, I've got something every week that I can't get down or can't get out there, whatever it is, for 4 weeks. So how am I going to be a supporter? And then by that time, they feel like they're on the outside.
How do you avoid that? What do you do to fix it?
You have to do the work of saying, okay, we're agreeing to do this. Again, use this as an example. What do we need to do? Okay, for 90 days, we're going to have 3 events, 1 per month. The first one's in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. The next one's in 8 weeks. The last one's in 12 weeks. Okay, who's going to plan the event? Where's the event going to be? What is the goal for each one? And you got to map it all out. And you have to take maybe Lauren on the team or somebody else, or hire somebody, an event planner, event coordinator. And you've got to really put the effort in to sequence what it is you're doing. Now, it's not just an event.
So let's assume, because I know in our situation, we'll schedule offsite meetings. We have one scheduled in about a week and a half.
Good.
Everybody's committed. It's in their calendar. We have the space secured.
Perfect.
It's commonly known you need to show up on time. If you're 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, people aren't happy. So there's this unspoken pressure, which I think is a good thing.
Of course.
But then having an agenda in advance, also very helpful. We've done that. what are the other problems that people might have? Or are those the big ones?
I think the ones that people usually forget most often is no agenda and no prep work. No agenda and no prep work. And prep work is not an hour. Prep work is like 5 to 10 minutes. And it says it in the email that you send out a week in advance. All right, everybody, really excited. Next Friday, 7 a.m. sharp. Food will be out. 7:30. We are starting the program. Doors closed. Very, very bold. That's it. Okay. Here's the agenda. Very basic. You don't want to give them all the details. You don't want to go into stuff because one, the agenda might change and you don't want anybody like upset. And two, you want to give a little bit of flexibility so people could just think high level. And then the final thing is, and we'd like you to think about these two things. Bring some thought or notes about these two things. Keep it to two. Simple. And whatever it is, if it's an offsite about strategic goal setting and planning, things that we're doing well and things that you'd like to see more of. So now it's like an opportunity. Everybody goes in with, what can we do differently? Well, then it becomes like a rant session, or it becomes like, that's the negative focus. Things we're doing well recognizes a high performing organization and gives you a chance to actually pat yourselves on the back. And sometimes that's actually the most critical part of going off site, is to recognize how much good you do before you start to say, here's all the stuff we need to change or address or fix or whatnot, which just gets tiring. And then the other part is, what would you like to add? What would you like to see more of at the firm? And you're going to get ideas. And you don't have to commit to doing any of those, but what you need to do is say, hey, 20 people showed up and gave us 40 data points, 2 data points each. What are we going to do with this information? Now we have this. Maybe ask them to just submit it in a shared doc or create a quick Google form, whatever it is, behind the firewall. Now you have these data points. That's important. People are sharing that information with you. Bring it out in the agenda. Make sure at some point you address it, or make sure at some point you give people a chance to air that. It's really important, though, if you're going to be offsite, to make sure that you have an agenda that's reasonable. So an agenda, pre-work that you want them to do, and then make sure that the agenda itself is manageable, because no one is going to let one person dominate or only a small group of people talk. And people will feel like, just subconsciously, they'll say, this was not an effective use of my time if there were 5 items on the agenda, but we only got to the first 2.
So we go into the meeting.
Yep.
We have a digestible agenda, and people appear to be contributing. They show up physically. Everybody appears to be showing up mentally. So we're at Sadis, we're doing those meetings. We've done some in the past with you. And since then, we continue to do them periodically amongst ourselves. What's the best way in determining the return on investment for these things? Is in an objective way. I know subjectively, I can assess, well, look, we did these meetings. Have we really done anything? It doesn't feel that way. But I also know that you and I can have a conversation about changing a pattern of behavior. It's not going to happen the first time. It might take 2, 3, 4, 5 conversations to really effectively change patterns. And that's just with the dynamic of you and I. Now you're in the dynamic of several people or a dozen people. How does one go about evaluating the return on investment and then how to fix it?
So you titled your show Unfiltered Finance.
Yeah, and you can correct me if you don't like the question.
There's a real value. There's a real return on investment that can be measured. It's not as simple as did we push more widgets out the door? Did we get a higher price per widget? Did we increase our headcount or our market share?
That's what I'm trying to assess, because a lot of times things happen while we're right. Man plans, God laughs. So things happen, and so we're a dynamic business, right? I seem to be a meteoric planet killer for a lot of service businesses.
Sure.
And I feel like the dynamic in the last 60 days on that subject has evolved, where it's no longer scary. It's no longer putting people out of business because it's still not ready for prime time.
Okay.
Right? Sullivan and Cromwell was in the press for using AI and having references that were not accurate. So my point is, how do we assess these things? Right? How do we really assess ROI? Because you're about to get into that.
Yeah, well, you need to set out expectations of like, what are we looking to achieve? Back to what I said earlier, the 4 criteria for a successful coaching engagement, a successful engagement period. What are we looking to achieve? If we're just looking, if the goal is simply to have a salon forum of conversation about something without a solution at the end, that's okay. Sometimes that's all you're going to get out of people. And if that's where you are when you plan this event and when you're thinking about it for SATIS or whatever the org is, then that's what you're going to go with. You got to manage the expectation. If your goal, though, is to achieve something like decide on where we're opening our next office, well, then make the list of like by the end of this session and say it up front. Here's the agenda. By the end of this session today, we are going to determine rough geography, size and shape, rough programming of what the space will look like, frequency of visits, who's going to come when and how and why, budget we're going to commit, and how long we're going to commit before we reevaluate. And it might only be like every 90 days, we'll just take like a quick check-in, but we're not going to derail the train here. We're going to commit for 1 full year to embed ourselves partner by partner, as a group, individually, on a going basis in a geography, because maybe it's a bigger initiative. If it's figuring out how to get AI integrated into the practice, that's a great use of a half day. That's great use. Give them a reading or two, steer it a little bit, have maybe a guest speaker or a video that everybody watches together, something like that, a resource, and then get into it and say, the outcome of today is to get a better understanding and devise the policy for SATIS. And that's it. That doesn't have to be perfect because, I mean, I can't even imagine if you put all lawyers in a room. There's got to be a joke about how long would it take to draft a policy if you hadn't been doing it for so much. But maybe what you do is
lawyers at the bottom to say a good start.
A good. That actually is that from the firm? That might actually be that's from a movie.
I think it predates movie possibly, but
okay. In any event. So yeah, I do think it's critically important to set some kind of like, what's the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? What's the outcome we want to achieve?
So what are the most common failures that might seem less noticeable, right? Obviously, infrequency of meeting, getting people's buy-in, failure to execute. Those are obvious mistakes or failures in management. But what are the less obvious ones that might lead to that precede those conclusions or results?
So you go through the effort of earmarking time, capital, blocking out calendars, whatnot. Did you ask a couple of people that weren't on the planning committee for input? Did you ask them what's their workload like? And is this a good date? Or like, is 4 people, 5 people, 7 people, it works, but 40 people are staring down a deadline the Monday after the Friday offsite. And they're like, oh my gosh, the last thing I want to do is not be on my desk. Like you're yanking my blanket away from me. This is very uncomfortable. You're going into a situation, you already have a much, much lower likelihood of success because people are automatically, distracted. So taking a front end poll and enlisting some champions amongst the different factions or groups or practice areas or whatever is a really good way to set it up for success. Now on the back end, before you leave, and I know you would never do this, but it's not the Ron Geffner show. So it doesn't wrap up at the end with Ron telling everybody what they're going to do, right? Or summarizing it in Ron's words and Rod's words alone. What has to happen, especially if it's a collaborative offsite, somebody's got to get up there with a marker on a pad or on a screen or on a board and write out, here are the big summaries. Here are the calls to action.
The action items.
Yeah. Well, it's not just action items. It's also summary points. Action items are like stuff people need to do.
Okay, so this is what
somebody's got to do a sum of like, what do we talk about? What do we agree to? What do we all get consensus about? And how is that going to impact what our next steps are? Because next steps without like how we got here then becomes, well, I lose interest. I forget why I'm even doing this. 3 weeks later, this was Ron's idea. I don't know, Ron wants me to. How many times do I do that in an organization? They say, well, because you want me to do whatever. I say, I don't want you to do anything. As a matter of fact, you sign the list of things that we're supposed to be talking about. You said you wanted to do them. I don't want you to do anything. What I want you to do is be fully transparent with yourself. And that's a really tough thing for a lot of people to do.
A lot of people, I would say, a lot of people would be like 95% of the public. One of the things that's come up in some of my prior conversations in my personal life was, I don't think you're being honest with yourself. So if you can't be honest with yourself, you can't be honest with me.
Yeah.
And I would make the statement that I think the majority of people are really not honest with themselves.
It happens.
It happens far more
Trust
frequently
but
than people
verify.
acknowledge.
Trust but verify. The first person that I speak to in an organization, I hear very specific. Who's the problem? What they do well, this, that, and the other thing. I don't know what the percentage is, but some great percentage of the time, it turns out the person I spoke to is a big contributor. It's not always a one person problem, but they're a big contributor. It turns out that their perception of things is not reality for the majority, which kind of means that their perception is wrong.
It's not reality. Yeah.
Yeah, because if others are all looking at it the same way, guess what? You're the one who's got the skewed reality. So there's a trust but verify component. And being an owner, as you know, being a boss, being a stakeholder, being a manager, right? Being a coach amongst your peers, amongst your people, it takes a little bit of forethought. It takes a little humility on your own part to say, I'm not just going to barge in here and say the points. I'm not just going to tell you you're looking at it wrong. I'm going to think critically. What does this individual need? What does this group need in this moment? I'm going to use my EQ. What does this group or individual need to realize they're not looking at it the right way, or to realize they're kind of off in how they're approaching this problem or the analysis we're talking about, or even just habitually, they're not going in the right direction or the direction that's best for them and the firm. And so to do that sometimes it takes a lot more talent and skill because you have to be delicate.
Yeah. I mean, when I was coaching one of my kids, assistant coaching, I should say, not the true coach, in basketball, you have to go to training. And the one thing that stood out with me was the Oreo cookie. And it was good, bad, good. So we talked about being sensitive. You show, you're a great coach, looking forward to it, or I've been looking forward to it. Then you give the negative and then you close it up with the positive. So I found that actually has worked well in approaching things.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up, what are the most common blind spots that come as a surprise to people that you've experienced?
Most common blind spots.
Yeah, like the less obvious ones, obviously, I might not know what other people think, or I'm missing the storyline because everybody thinks differently. So my perspective is wrong. I understand that's a blind spot, but it can be a shocking blind spot. Is there anything else that sometimes leaves you scratching your head that is captain obvious?
You know what it is? A blind spot is we get these big jobs and we have a lot of responsibility. We have nice offices, expensive clothes, and nice trips. And we think we need like big sophisticated solutions. And our gut as humans, we're wired to like think things through, or many of us are. And I would say one of the most common blind spots is people overthink and hyper focus and try to solve their way out of something with some complex cockamamie scheme instead of just like playing lazy, like play the part of lazy and just what's the problem and what's the easy solution? What's the issue? What's the way to resolve it? And it's like the Seinfeld episode where Kramer's on the other line pretending to be movie phone. Why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you want to go to? I think of that like, that wasn't the point of the joke, obviously, but it kind of is that instead of going through this complex, like press the number 3 times, spell it out, like just tell me the name of, why don't you just solve the problem? Like, why don't you just address the thing? Why don't you just look it up? Why don't you just ask, you mentioned AI. Why don't you just ask the gimmick, ask the algorithm? What's the answer here? Or what's the right way to do it? And so, I didn't even think I could use it that way. I'm like, but you kind of did. You kind of knew you needed to do it. But because we changed it from the window that said Google above it to the window that says like ChatGPT, you got confused. So just go with the direct line to solving the situation, to solving the problem. And don't try to make it this very complex thing that you need to have pride of authorship over.
So wrapping up, one final question. We're looking for a business coach. And if you go on, like, I'm inundated on LinkedIn. I'm even trying not to accept introductions because I just want to deal with the solicitation. Business coaches. There are more strategic business coaches, and there's a few other service firms that are offering that seem to be proliferating. What advice would you give someone who wants to hire a coach for their organization? What distinguishes the better coaches from the lesser quality? Is there anything that's sort of clear?
Yeah, what stands out to me, and I work with a lot, I bring them through to programs that I'm on. I'm still a student of the game, very much so. I have a coach and use throughout the year multiple coaches, hire multiple coaches myself, spot repairs, whatnot. If they don't have a process, like when you say, like, what's your process? What's your experience? If they don't have experience, not necessarily in your industry, because believe it or not, it's not about how many law firms have you worked with. It's not about how many pharmaceutical companies have you worked with. It's how many scenarios with organizations, teams, whatever, that look like us have you helped with the problems that we have or the things that we want to address? And then what's the process you take them through? What's the experience of it all? If they can't articulate that, if you don't get a sense that that will fit with you, then don't go there. Because if it's someone who has a tremendous amount of world experience or so, like, world-renowned, they're probably going to just be a storyteller and try to tell you all the things that they did in their scenario, but never really make the connection or help you make the connection yourself to how that works for you. If they don't have a process to take you through, it's going to be a therapy session over and over again. In the end, they're going to leave saying, like, okay, go do the dirty work. I'll see you in 3 weeks. So I know that that's the case, and I know that that's out there. You must ask the questions. You must believe in the Socratic method, in my estimation. That is what helps people arrive at something that then is permanent versus simply like, oh, they gave a great talk. They really helped us see these things. Okay, so what are you still doing now after 6 months? Nothing. Well, why? Because I don't know. It was all their stuff. So someone has a process. It will include making it stick at the end so they can step away and you can continue to go on your own.
Any other subject that you think is relevant to the audience tied to what it is you do, or any of the conversations we've had thus far?
I think in general, I was hoping you were going there when you said the AI thing is kind of taking a beat right now. Many people are coming to the realization that as powerful as a tool as it may be, as many people that might be making all this money, creating, agents and, spinning up businesses real quick, at the end, we all look left when we walk on the plane. We know that the plane flies itself. We know it can take off and land on its own. We know it has all the computing power to go through any type of weather storm, right? Or any weather situation. But we still look left and we want to see the captains up there. We want to see a nice, cleanly dressed captain with the hat on, the buttons nice and orderly, the little flight, program on the pad, right? We still look left. Whether you're an attorney, whether you're an actuary, whether you still have a function. And the more you lean into that, the more you lean into relationships, the more you lean into the intangible that AI can't replicate. The more job security you have, the more satisfaction you're going to have, the less sleepless nights you can have, and more likely you're going to attract people to your organization, your team, or whatever it is, whatever banner you're waving, because they're going to see that you're innovating yourself. Use the tool, but be yourself. Be a human.
Words to live by, Joe.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Great conversation.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Likewise.
And I hope it's always a mutual learning experience when we do.
100%.
I learned some things today. I'm being serious. I'm chomping at the bit. We have an offsite. I want to ask all the attendees, which is only 5 or 6 of us, some questions as to what should be on the agenda, what items. I'm going to go through a litany of things. And then in advance, I'm going to send out homework assignments for 5 or 10 minutes, no more.
That's it.
Keep the agenda tight.
That's it. Have a blast. I'm going to check in with you on it after. I want to hear how it went, and I want to hear how, what everyone's commitments were as a result of it.
Well, much appreciated. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Rob.